Hi there again and welcome back. Now, writer's block. Do you suffer from it? You're just in the mood to start creating your music and you draw a blank. Those creative juices just ain't flowing. Well, today I want to offer some tips on preventing that and talk about creating a mood, an atmosphere, how you get the listeners to feel the mood you're trying to create in your music. And you can't do that unless you yourself have a clear vision of what you're going to create yourself before you start composing. I'm also going to show you an extreme example of a passage I've been asked to create to make an audience feel uncomfortable. But before I go any further, can I once again just give a huge thank you to all subscribers. Please do subscribe if you haven't done so already to be alerted when other videos are uploaded, and please continue to keep your questions coming, either here in the comments section on YouTube or feel free to email me directly at musicdirectoronline@gmail.com. So today then I'm on the subject of orchestration again. Now, in the orchestral suite of videos, do take a look at those here if you haven't done so already. I do talk quite a lot about creating moods, setting the scene, so to speak, so that listeners of your music can become more engrossed in what you're trying to say. You may have decided it's a joyful piece or a slow, moody piece, a melancholy piece. You may have decided on a key or even have a melody already created. If you've made those decisions already, you're well underway to start composing. But if you're right at the beginning of this process, you need a story to tell. Let me explain. This is a blank sheet of paper. Well, a virtual blank sheet. This is maybe a better example, or even this if you're sitting in front of your door. I'm sometimes asked when faced with a blank sheet of paper, how do you get those creative juices to flow? Well, you could just put your hand on your keyboard and start playing with some melody in your head. Or better still, you could start by telling your story through the music that you write. In the orchestral suite that I just mentioned, it was relatively easy to put together because I had a story to tell. Of course, if you're composing and writing to film, that's exactly what you're doing. You're enhancing the story with your music. So not having any inspiration for your composing shouldn't be a problem. With every piece of music you compose, you could try having a firm vision in your mind as to what you want to convey. When I was younger, I was introduced to a piece of music called Carnival of the Animals by Sanson. This is a great example of how music and instruments of the orchestra can be used to mimic even the animals portrayed in the piece. Let me demonstrate. Here you can hear a depiction of kangaroos jumping around the Australian bush, or an aquarium, the feeling of swimming underwater surrounded by fish. And in this example, birds fluttering around in an aviary. When some of the great ballets were being composed, Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake or Nutcracker, Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet, they all had great stories to tell. Similarly, in opera, Wagner and Verdi were telling stories and therefore had a clear vision, no doubt, in their mind as to what they envisaged happening on stage during the process of composing. Creating a mood can also be depicted by using sounds as well. If you have this underlying sound, for instance, you know you are in a hot part of the world. If you then add certain instruments, they themselves can narrow down where in the world we are about to venture. In the piece where I needed to create a passage of waking up in Ceylon, for instance, I combined both. This is a track for an example, and we start off with, I think, just a pad, and then the sound effect itself comes in. There we go. And some very straightforward stringed chords. Nothing complicated. There's no complicated part writing involved here. It's just sounds and then an Indian instrument. It set the mood straight away as to where we are in the world. We build that pad, another layer there, a cymbal as a transition, and then an Indian rhythm. And straight away, without any complicated writing, we've created a mood. What is sometimes called mood music is just a series of chords played using synth pads, usually laid one on top of another, that is created to make the listener feel relaxed. Okay, so I'm going to now start to try and create what I would call some mood music, something that straight away should make you feel relaxed. And there's a lot of emphasis, I think, on lots of YouTube videos to just go in straight away, complicated, make it sound absolutely fantastic. But I just want to break the elements down and use 4 chords and say 2 or maybe 3 tracks to create the mood that I'm talking about. So you'll see in front of me now we have a blank project from Cubase. We'll start by creating a few instrument tracks. So here, some contact. We'll send it straight to the stereo out because I'm not too concerned about doing massive amounts of mixing. We'll add 4 tracks to start with, and those 4 tracks open straight away. I don't know why it does that. It does actually open the interfaces. Someone's going to tell me why it does that. Let's start with contact 1. Okay, now we're going to use 4 chords, and we'll use some really straightforward chords. So no 7th chords or diminished chords or anything like that. We're going to start with C minor. We'll go then to B flat, we'll go to A flat, and we'll go to G, and we'll get those chords to rotate a few times. So I've set the metronome at round about 80. It could be a little slower, but it's a good starting point. Let's find actually our first sound. Now I'm going to go to Spitfire Audios. This is Albion 1, I believe. And there's a few pads here. There's one called Intriguing Pad. Let's have a listen. Oh yes. Slightly ethereal. That'll do for now. Okay, so let's work around those 4 chords. Let's see what happens. Okay, I used a suspended chord in there. Sorry, I went from A flat to G suspended 4th, and then it resolved to G. Okay, let's just listen to that, make sure it captures it okay. Suspended 4th and G resolved. Okay, if I open that up, let's take a little bit closer look at that. That's fine. Okay, and if we're really careful, we'll just duplicate that. And we'll duplicate it again. Yeah, that should be enough. Let's just check that join. Yep, it's not perfect, but okay, so we've got our 4 chords going round 3 times. Let's look at, oh, I better label this up. We'll call that, I don't know, we'll call it pad 1. Okay, so contract instrument number 2. Yeah, let's go for another pad. What we got? I think in the steam drones. Phasing anger. I think that was. Yeah, that's quite ethereal. Just give it a little bit of extra volume. Okay. Okay, so let's have a go at putting this in. I think what we might do is we'll let it play through once and then start playing with this new sound. No, we won't do that at all. We'll start virtually straight away. In fact, we could start about before it like this, can't we? So all I was doing there was just playing around with notes, making sure that more or less the majority of the notes in any melody fall within the notes in the chord in that particular bar. Sometimes I don't always obey that rule. You'll see here, for instance, what did I play there? I went. These are called passing notes. There's one, look. Play from there. Da 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 da, passing notes. I will call that pad 2. I always like in this type of music to put some kind of choir in, and I do have Sound Iron's Requiem Light, which kind of serves all the purposes that I've ever needed it for, and I want women sustaining vowels. And you've always got access to 2 sounds within this package at any one time. We've got 2 sources with a crossfader here. So for instance, I can have an O, and then if I move the fader across, it will move to this sound. Let's set it to an R. So we've started with an or we could put it to a, I don't know, what's that one? That's fine. Let's just have a look at reverb. Let's just up that level. Yeah, okay. I think what we'll do is we'll just stick to one sound in this, and we'll go for R, I think. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. I think what we'll do, we might bring that in at the second refrain. Let's just play it from the beginning and see how we go. Well, other than mucking it up at the end. You see what I'm trying to do? I've just got 3 voices there, and I think what I'll do is let's just make that a little bit louder. I've only got 3 sounds there, but already I've created a mood. Let's just play one more time from when the choir comes in. Well, it's quite untidy at the moment. I would need a lot of tidying up if I was going to use it anymore. But the point I wanted to make is moods can be created relatively easily. Don't try to get too complex. Now, I promised you a look at a passage I needed to create in a production I'm working on at the moment, where the director wanted me to make the audience feel uncomfortable. Now, maybe you might not want to call this music at all. It's maybe you could say it's just a series of sounds, a soundscape, if you will. The orchestral libraries, or many orchestral libraries that we have, usually contain a proportion of samples that have been modified and have had numerous effects added. And these samples are sometimes sold separately and used mainly for effect, but they are great tools for creating a mood. Let's take a look. Now, I started this task by selecting a whole host of what I call quite creepy sounding effects from the various libraries that we end up with. I wanted to first of all start with something that the audience would think, is that a sound I can hear? What's that? Something's quite unusual. And I found something called, let's have a look what this is called. Very slow pad pendulum. Yeah, quite eerie. I then found something called a 9000 piece, and I think this is also from Spitfire's Albin 1. It's very atmospheric. And nothing would be scary if it didn't have any Easter Highland bangs in it. If I can find them. Where are they? I think they're in here. Here we go. Plenty of rumble there. I then found Approaching Comet. I think that is also in Albin 1. Yes, it is. And then a fantastic library that's very underrated for things like this is free, and it's Project Sam's The Free Orchestra, and it's got a fair few. Let's just have a look at what else it's got. Yeah, it's not got a massive amount, but one of them is called Ghostly Clusters, and it worked perfectly for this. Just press any key or two keys. Yeah, so that went into my list. Then something called Pandora Panic. I think that's another Project Sam free orchestra as well. Yep. Whoa, whoa. Yep, okay. I think it keeps coming back as well. Okay, and no spooky section is complete without some kind of Latin phrase. That's Sound Iron's Requiem Light Again, which I showed before, The Men. Some Latin phrases. And then I think I finished with some a couple of risers. Sound effect, here's one. And one that I entitled Creepy. How does this sound? Okay, now you could call this a bit of a soundscape more than anything else, rather than music, but it demonstrates my point of being relatively straightforward. You don't have to be so musically conscious to make an audience feel uncomfortable in this instance. Let me play it from the beginning, and this is what it sounds like. Now, when I was putting this together, I'm just playing these tracks quite randomly, really. And then we're going to start to build. Whether you're creating music to tell a story on stage or enhancing someone else's story when composing to film, you're actually creating that mood I talked about. So when you're next faced with that blank sheet of paper or manuscript or a new project in your DAW, try to visualize what you're about to write in the form of an image. You'll soon find those creative juices flow much more readily if you know your story and your mood at the very onset. See you next time.